The edge of the folder was smooth, a line of crisp, cream-colored cardstock against my thumb. It was the kind of detail Marcus appreciated. Quality paper, a clean font. He believed presentation was a form of respect. I was in his office looking for a stamp, a mundane reason to be in a room that had slowly become more his than ours. And there it was, not hidden, but not displayed, sitting in the wire inbox on the corner of his desk. The label, printed in his careful architectural hand, read, "Transition Timeline." For a moment, my mind refused to connect the words to my life. A transition timeline was for a project, a corporate merger, a rebranding. It was a sterile professional term. But the air in the room had gone still, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen suddenly the only sound in the world. I lifted the cover. It wasn't a project. It was a plan. For his life, after mine. My name is Yvette. I am 35 years old, and I am a landscape architect. Marcus, my husband of 7 years, was 38. We had been together for a decade, long enough to have built something that, from the outside, looked permanent. In my work, I design living systems. I know that the most beautiful gardens are not accidents of nature. They are the result of meticulous planning. You have to understand the soil, the light, the water. You have to know which roots will strangle each other and which will intertwine to create a stronger foundation. A relationship I'd always believed was similar. It required constant attention to the unseen infrastructure, the drainage, the nutrients, the things that happen deep in the dark that allow life to flourish on the surface. For years, I believed we were tending the same garden. I was wrong. I was the garden, and he was just enjoying the view, assuming the flowers bloomed on their own. The line that finally severed the last root was delivered on a Tuesday evening in July, months after I'd first found that folder. He said it with the casual air of a man asking to pass the salt. We were cleaning up after dinner, the scent of lemon and roasted chicken still warm in the air. I was rinsing plates, my back to him. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. "So," he began, and the manufactured casualness in his voice was a warning light. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future." I placed a plate in the dishwasher, the clatter loud in the quiet kitchen. I didn't turn around. I just waited. "I think we've grown into different people, Yvette," he continued, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "It's no one's fault. It just happens. And I want to handle this with respect for what we had." He paused, waiting for me to engage, to ask, to cry. I did none of those things. I simply picked up another plate. His frustration was a low hum under his words. He needed my participation to play his scene correctly. Finally, he sighed, a sound of put-upon patience. "Look, I just want this to be peaceful. You've always been so reasonable." And there it was. Not a request, but a coronation. He was crowning me reasonable because my reason, my composure, my steadiness had always been the infrastructure that made his life easy. It was not a compliment. It was a user agreement. He was informing me of the terms of my own demolition. He expected me to be calm, to be logical, to be reasonable, as he packed his bags and dismantled the life I had so carefully tended. He wanted me to nod and agree that our home was now just a property to be divided. He wanted a clean exit, and he had cast me in the role of the cooperative departure lounge. That was the moment I stopped being the garden and became the architect of my own. He thought he was presenting a finished plan. He had no idea I'd already broken ground on a new one. To understand how we got to that kitchen, you have to excavate the layers of soil we'd built up over the years. You have to see the archaeology of our marriage. So much of it was built on my quiet consent, on my willingness to be the steady ground he walked on. Early in our relationship, he'd said something that I, in my naivete, had framed and hung in the gallery of my heart. We were sitting on the porch of our first apartment, the humid Durham night thick with the scent of jasmine. He took my hand and said, "You're the steadiest person I know. That's what I love." I had glowed. I took it to mean he saw my strength, my reliability, my calm core. I thought he loved me for the woman I was. Now, I hear it for what it was. A customer review. He loved the service I provided. Steadiness wasn't a character trait he admired. It was a resource he consumed. My calm was the buffer that absorbed the shocks of his life. My reason was the management system that organized his chaos. My strength was the load-bearing wall that allowed him to build whatever flimsy structures he desired without fear of collapse. He didn't love me. He loved the ecosystem I created for him. The first major act of excavation happened in our 3rd year of marriage. Marcus had a master's in business, and with it came $94,000 in student loan debt. It was a weight on him, a source of constant, low-grade anxiety that soured his moods and shortened his temper. The interest rate was predatory. He complained about it constantly, the injustice of it, the way it held him back from his grand plans for the firm he was trying to build. One Saturday, I spent 8 hours researching consolidation options. I built a spreadsheet. I compared rates, terms, and lender reviews. I discovered that with my credit score, which was nearly pristine, and my steady income, we could refinance the entire amount into a private loan under my name, cutting the interest rate by more than half. It would save us tens of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. I presented it to him that evening, the spreadsheet laid out on the dining room table like a blueprint. He looked it over, his eyes scanning the numbers. He wasn't looking at the mechanics of it. He was looking at the bottom line, the final number that spelled his relief. "Wow," he said, leaning back. "See? This is what I mean. You have a head for this stuff." He framed it as a compliment to my innate talent, a natural extension of who I was. It wasn't. It was a weekend of my life. It was hours of tedious work. It was me putting my name, my credit, my financial identity on the line to solve his problem. I was the sole signatory. The risk was entirely mine. The payment, a significant one, would come out of my bank account on the 1st of every single month. We went to the bank the following week. The air smelled of clean carpets and old paper. I remember the weight of the pen in my hand as I signed the documents, the smooth, authoritative glide of the loan officer's voice. Marcus sat beside me, looking relieved, like a man who had just successfully outsourced a difficult task. As we walked out into the bright afternoon sun, he squeezed my shoulder. "Thank you, Yvette. That's a huge weight off." He said thank you, but the gratitude was fleeting. The relief was his, but the burden, the monthly debit, the legal obligation was now mine. For the next 48 months, on the 1st of every month, I felt that payment leave my account. It was a quiet digital reminder that I had absorbed his past, that I was financing his future. He never mentioned it again. It was simply solved, another part of the household infrastructure, like the electricity or the water, that just worked. Because I was making it work. I was steady. I was reasonable. The second exhibit in this excavation is from 2 years ago. Marcus's small marketing firm was going through a rebrand. He and his business partner were trying to move upmarket to attract a more corporate clientele. They needed a new look, a new logo, something that spoke of sophistication and stability. They'd hired a graphic designer who came back with 3 concepts that were, in Marcus's words, uninspired garbage. He was panicked. They had a launch event in 2 weeks and no visual identity. He came home one Friday night, defeated, spreading the designer's proofs on the kitchen island with a sigh of disgust. "I don't know what to do, Eve. This is a disaster. We look like a tech startup from 2008. I had a minor in fine arts in college. I've always been able to draw. I looked at the proofs and I saw the problem. They were generic, soulless. They didn't reflect the heart of what Marcus claimed he wanted to build. So I did what I always did. I stepped in to solve the problem." "Let me try something," I said. That weekend, I didn't touch the garden designs for my own clients. I didn't read my book or go for a run. I turned our small sunroom into a studio. I worked with pencils and sketch pads, the smell of graphite and brewing coffee filling the air. I listened to him. I listened to the words he used to describe his company's ethos: classic, bespoke, foundational. I translated his vision into form. I hand-lettered a logo type, elegant and strong, with a subtle mark that suggested growth, a stylized leaf. I presented 3 variations to him on Sunday night. He stared at them, his face transformed. The panic was gone, replaced by a slow dawning awe. "Yvette, these are incredible. This is it. This is what I saw in my head." He chose one. I spent the next 2 days digitizing it, creating the vector files, the brand guide with color palettes and font pairings. I emailed it all to him Wednesday morning. He was ecstatic. His partner loved it. They rushed it to the printer, made the deadline for the launch. The rebrand was a huge success. A month later, a local business magazine did a feature on their firm's relaunch. There was a beautiful full-page photo of Marcus and his partner in their newly branded office. And there, on the wall behind them, was the logo I had designed. The article was glowing. It praised their sharp new vision, their keen eye for detail. The byline for the brand design, mentioned in a small caption, credited his business partner, who had a cousin who dabbled in design and had apparently given them some early feedback. I was sitting on the sofa, the magazine open in my lap, when Marcus came home. He was beaming, holding his own copy. "Did you see it? We're famous." I looked from the magazine to his face. I waited. I gave him the space to say it. To say, "They got it wrong, honey. I'm going to call them and get a correction." To say, "I told them you did it, but they must have gotten their notes mixed up." To say anything that acknowledged my work, my weekend, my contribution. He said nothing. He just basked in the glow of his success, a success branded by my unpaid, uncredited labor. I folded the magazine and placed it on the coffee table. I never mentioned it. What would be the point? To complain would be dramatic. To ask for credit would be petty. It was easier, more peaceful, to just absorb it, to be reasonable. And so my work hung on his wall, a silent testament to the parts of me he had consumed and repurposed for his own use. The final layer of erosion wasn't about money or work. It was about narrative. And the architect of that was his sister, Bridget. Bridget was a woman who lived her life as a series of curated press releases. Her marriage, her children, her career. Everything was presented with a flawless, effortless sheen. She was sharp, intelligent, and deeply invested in the public perception of her family. To her, appearances were not deceiving. They were the point. And in the story of Marcus, she had cast him as the brilliant, burdened artist and me as his supportive, if unglamorous, stage manager. She never said anything overtly unkind to me. It was more subtle than that. It was in the way she'd direct all her complex questions to Marcus at family dinners, as if my thoughts on politics or finance were irrelevant. It was in the way she'd compliment my cooking by saying, "Marcus is so lucky to have someone who takes care of things. He has so much on his plate." The implication was clear. His plate was full of important, world-changing work, while mine was just a plate. The echo pattern started subtly. After a weekend visit with Bridget, Marcus would come home speaking her language. He'd use words like optics and bandwidth. He began to see his own life through her lens. One evening, after a particularly stressful week at his firm, he sank onto the sofa and rubbed his temples. I sat next to him. "Tough week?" He nodded, not looking at me. "Bridget thinks I've been carrying a lot. She sees things." The phrasing was so peculiar. Not, "I've been carrying a lot," but "Bridget thinks I've been carrying a lot." He was outsourcing his own feelings to her, letting her name his experience for him. She was the authority on his own life. She sees things. The implication was that I did not. I, who paid his old debts and designed his new logo, who managed the soil of our daily lives, I was blind. Bridget, with her bi-monthly check-ins and curated advice, she was the one with true sight. The worst of it, the scene that I now see as the true beginning of his plan, was something I pieced together later, from the notes I found in that folder. But I can picture it so clearly, it feels like a memory. I see him at Bridget's immaculate kitchen island, the white marble cool and unforgiving. She is pouring him a glass of expensive red wine, but not one for herself. She is on duty. "Clean exits matter, Marcus," I can hear her saying, her voice low and strategic. "You've outgrown the situation. It's a natural evolution. You don't owe her a scene. You don't owe her a fight. That's just messy, and it pulls you down into a place you don't need to be. You owe her respect, and you owe yourself peace." In their vocabulary, respect meant a lack of confrontation, and peace meant his comfort. It had nothing to do with my heart. Just the decision. She would have continued, sliding a crisp, leather-bound notepad and a heavy pen across the counter towards him. "Be clear, be kind, but be firm. Write down your points, stay on script, don't get pulled into old emotions." And I can see him picking up the pen. I can see him starting to write, his brow furrowed in concentration, not with the pain of a man ending a marriage, but with the focus of a student preparing for a test. He was not planning a conversation. He was drafting a corporate memo. It was last spring when I found the physical evidence of that coaching session. I was looking for a book of stamps in his desk drawer, a simple domestic errand. Tucked beneath a stack of old invoices was the cream-colored folder. Transition timeline. My heart didn't pound. It went perfectly still. Inside were Bridget's talking points, handwritten on notepad paper, and Marcus's typed-out timeline. Week 1. Initial conversation, soft approach. Week 2 to 4. Discuss logistics, finances, property. Week 5. Secure new apartment. Week 8. Move out. It was a project plan for the dissolution of my life. It was dated for the coming fall. He was giving himself months to prepare, to get his narrative straight, to line up his ducks in a neat, clean row. I closed the folder. I put it back exactly where I had found it, beneath the invoices. I closed the drawer. I stood up and walked out of the room, my movements calm and deliberate. I went back to the kitchen to finish making dinner. He came home an hour later, kissed my cheek, and asked what was smelling so good. My steadiness, the quality he claimed to love, had become a liability. He mistook my quiet for ignorance. He mistook my calm for contentment. He had no idea that a landscape architect knows that before you can build something new, you must first survey the existing terrain, understand its weaknesses, and quietly, methodically clear the site. That night, I ate the dinner I had cooked, and I listened to him talk about his day. And in the quiet spaces between his words, I began to draw my own set of plans. The first call I made was on my lunch break the following Monday to a realtor my friend had recommended. Her name was Angela. She had a warm, no-nonsense voice. I told her I was looking to buy a small house, just for myself, and that I had a very specific timeline. The breaking point, when it came, was not a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet click. It was months after I'd found the physical folder, after I had already been pre-approved for a mortgage, after I had already viewed a dozen small bungalows in the historic districts of Durham. My own plan was well underway, a secret garden I was cultivating in the shadows of my marriage. But there was still a part of me, a stubborn, hopeful root that wondered if I was wrong. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe the folder was an old idea, a moment of weakness he had since abandoned. That hope died on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus was at his standing weekend brunch with friends, a ritual that had become as predictable as the sunrise. I was using his laptop to look up a recipe. His email was open. I had never, in our 10 years together, looked through his private messages. It felt like a violation of the very trust I was accusing him of breaking, but a strange impulse, a need for absolute certainty, guided my hand. I clicked on his sent folder. I didn't have to scroll far. The subject line was Apartment Application, M. Davies. It was dated 4 months prior. I opened it. It was a rental application for a luxury one-bedroom apartment in a new development downtown. Attached were his bank statements, a letter of employment, and a signed lease agreement. The move-in date was October 1st. I clicked back to the email he had sent. There, below his signature, was the original listing he had forwarded to the leasing agent. My eyes scanned the details: hardwood floors, granite countertops, a view of the city. And then I saw the sentence he had written in the body of the email. Hoping for a quiet unit, he'd written. Going through a peaceful transition and would appreciate a low-drama environment. A peaceful transition, the same sterile corporate language from his notes. He was describing the end of our marriage as if it were a software update. My blood didn't run cold. My heart didn't break. It was something else, a feeling I recognized from my work. It was the moment you tap a retaining wall with a trowel and you don't hear a solid thud, but a hollow, crumbling echo. It's the moment you realize the structure is rotten from the inside out, and it's not a matter of if it will fall, but when. All the hope, all the lingering doubt, turned to dust. There was no saving the garden. The foundation was gone. I closed the laptop. The sensation was one of absolute, chilling clarity. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even betrayal. Not anymore. It was the quiet, calm finality of a diagnosis. The system had failed. I was no longer a wife trying to save her marriage. I was a project manager executing a demolition and a new build simultaneously. My timeline, I decided in that moment, would be faster than his. The next few months were an exercise in surreal compartmentalization. On the surface, I was the same Yvette. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I went to family events and smiled at Bridget's backhanded compliments. I performed the role of the steady, reasonable wife with an unnerving precision because I knew it was a limited-run engagement. Internally, I was a whirlwind of methodical action. My lunch breaks were no longer for eating. They were for phone calls with Angela, my realtor, and Ben, my mortgage broker. I viewed houses on Wednesday afternoons, my official site visit day for work, a convenient excuse that he never questioned. He was so absorbed in the narrative of his own secret departure that he couldn't see the signs of mine. My quiet was not contentment, it was concentration. I found it in late August. A small 1940s brick bungalow with good bones and a disastrously overgrown yard. It was perfect. The garden was a wreck, choked with weeds, poorly graded, with a cracked concrete patio. But I saw what it could be. I saw the bluestone terrace, the climbing roses, the raised beds for herbs and vegetables. I saw a space that would be entirely mine, a landscape I could shape from the soil up. I put in an offer that day. The dramatic irony of those weeks was thick enough to choke on. Marcus, feeling the clock tick on his own timeline, became more affectionate. He was trying to soften the ground for the blow he was planning to deliver. He would wrap his arms around me while I was washing dishes, burying his face in my hair. "I love our quiet nights," he'd murmur, and I would stand perfectly still, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water, thinking about the inspection report for my new house that had just landed in my inbox. One evening, we were watching a movie where a couple was going through a bitter divorce. He shook his head, a look of distaste on his face. "God, I don't understand people like that," he said, his voice full of self-righteous pity. "Let's not make this messy. We're better than that." I looked at him. He was speaking to me, but he was also rehearsing for an audience of one, himself. He was reinforcing the character he wanted to play, the good guy, the mature one, the one who handled things with class. "We are," I said, my voice even. My closing date was less than 2 weeks away. I had already booked the movers. My planning was a landscape architect's dream. It was a master plan, executed in phases. Phase 1, site assessment and preparation. That was the secret financial planning, securing the loan, understanding my assets. Phase 2, hardscaping. That was finding and securing the house itself, the permanent structure. Phase 3, planting and installation. That was the move. I arranged everything with the precision of a site foreman. I used a moving company that specialized in discreet, fast relocations. I packed non-essential items into boxes I bought and stored in the back of my car, taking them to a small storage unit I'd rented under my name. I packed my books, my old college art projects, the beautiful pottery I'd collected that he never noticed. The house slowly, imperceptibly emptied of my essence. He didn't notice a thing. His world was so full of himself. There was little room to register the growing negative space. The closing was on a Friday. I took the day off work, telling Marcus I had a series of site visits across town. I sat in a sterile beige conference room and signed a mountain of paperwork. The lawyer slid a set of keys across the table. They were cold and solid in my hand. They felt like the truth. I spent that afternoon at my new house. Not unpacking, just being. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I stood in the overgrown backyard, the sun warm on my face, and I designed the entire garden in my head. I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. It was the feeling of soil that is finally ready for planting. The temperature of that afternoon was one of ground-level deliberation. The soil had been turned. The old diseased roots had been dug up. The plot was clear. Saturday was his brunch day. He was gone by 10 a.m., dressed in his weekend uniform of expensive jeans and a casual button-down, off to complain to his friends about his workload, a performance I had witnessed 100 times. The moment his car was out of the driveway, my phone was in my hand. "They can come now," I said to the moving foreman. A large yellow truck pulled up 20 minutes later. The efficiency was breathtaking. A team of 4 men, polite and professional, descended on the house. My life was wrapped, boxed, and loaded in under 3 hours. The bed disappeared. The sofa we'd bought together was suddenly gone. The art on the walls vanished, leaving pale rectangles in its place. The house grew hollow, echoing with the absence of the life I had curated within it. I did a final walkthrough. His things looked strange and lonely without mine to contextualize them. His leather armchair sat in the living room like a beached whale. His row of identical gray suits hung in the closet, a cavernous space now that my clothes were gone. My last stop was the bedroom. On his nightstand was a leather-bound notebook. I knew it was the one Bridget had given him. I opened it. There it was, his script. The notes for our soft conversation. This isn't about you, it's about me. I will always cherish what we had, hoping we can be friends in the future. It was a collection of clichés so worn they were transparent. This was the gentle, respectful exit he had been planning. This was the performance he was going to give. I took the single page of notes out of the notebook. I folded it neatly in half. I walked over to his side of the bed, fluffed his pillow, and placed the folded paper directly in the center, where he couldn't possibly miss it. It was the only thing I left behind, a symbol of his plan, returned to sender. I walked out of the house, closing the door quietly behind me. I did not look back. I had my phone on silent for the rest of the day. As I unpacked boxes in my new, sun-filled living room, I could feel it vibrating on the counter, a frantic, buzzing insect. I ignored it. I arranged my books on the shelves. I plugged in the kettle. I sat on my own sofa, in my own house, and drank a cup of tea as the sun set, casting long shadows through the bare windows. The quiet wasn't empty. It was whole. Around 8 o'clock, I finally looked at the screen. 37 missed calls from Marcus, 15 from Bridget, a string of texts that chronicled his entire emotional collapse in real time. The first texts were confused. "Where are you? Did you go somewhere?" Then denial. "Is this a joke? Where is all your stuff?" Then the dawning, horrified realization. "Did you leave? What the hell, Yvette?" The anger and accusations came next. "This is insane. You are being completely childish and manipulative. After everything, this is how you act? You could have just talked to me." This was followed by a barrage of texts from Bridget, each one dripping with venom. "I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but you have deeply hurt my brother. You should be ashamed of yourself. He was trying to do the right thing, and you chose to humiliate him." I deleted her messages without reading them in full. Her opinion had ceased to be a factor in my life. I let Marcus stew in his own chaos for another hour before I decided to answer. He called again, and this time I picked up. His voice was a ragged mess of fury and panic. "What did you do?" he yelled, no preamble. "What the hell did you do?" I was quiet for a moment, letting his panic echo in the silence. "I moved out, Marcus." "You moved out? Just like that? With no conversation, no warning? You just disappeared?" "I believe you had a conversation planned," I said, my voice perfectly even. "I found your notes." There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. He was speechless. He had been so sure of his control over the narrative, so confident in his secret plan. The idea that I had my own, and that it had completely eclipsed his, had broken his brain. I was trying to protect you," he stammered, the lie sounding flimsy even to him. "I was trying to do this gently." And then came the line, the one that revealed everything. His voice cracked with a sense of profound, personal injury. I was going to do this gently. You took that from me. He wasn't angry that our marriage was over. He was angry that he had lost his starring role. He was furious that I had taken the script, torn it up, and walked off the set. He hadn't lost a wife. He had lost an audience. I took a slow breath. It was time for my one and only line in his tragic play. I employed the correction technique, taking his frame and replacing one word to change everything. You weren't being gentle, Marcus, I said quietly. You were being convenient. I heard a sharp intake of breath. I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call and blocked his number. I blocked Bridget's too. The performance was over. The house lights were down. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. My new house became my sanctuary and my canvas. The work of rebuilding my life was literal. I spent my weekends in the yard, pulling up the choking ivy and amending the tired soil. I sketched designs for the garden, not for a client, but for myself. I laid a bluestone patio by hand, the physical labor a welcome ache in my muscles. I planted daphne and lavender and boxwoods, plants with structure and scent and resilience. My professional life blossomed in parallel. Freed from the constant, low-level drain of managing Marcus's emotional and practical needs, I had a surplus of energy. I took on new clients, bigger projects. I designed a rooftop garden for a hotel downtown and a sprawling country estate garden that won a regional award. My work was focused, my vision was clear, and my invoices were paid on time. I was no longer giving away my creativity as a free supplement to my husband's career. I was a landscape architect, and my time and talent had value. The peace I found was not a dramatic, cinematic triumph. It was a series of small, quiet moments. The pleasure of drinking coffee in the morning sun on a patio I had built myself. The satisfaction of cooking a meal and knowing all the groceries were bought with my own money to be eaten at my own table. The freedom of an entire closet, organized exactly as I liked it. I was not lonely. I was sovereign. I saw Marcus one last time, about 6 months later. We had to meet to sign the final divorce papers. We met at a neutral coffee shop, a place with no memories attached. I arrived first, chose a small table by the window. When he walked in, my first thought was how ordinary he looked. Smaller somehow. Without the backdrop of our home, without the curated life I had built around him, he was just a man. A handsome man, yes, but diminished. The air of effortless success replaced by a faint, lingering confusion. He was civil. He had a new script now, one of resignation and mild bewilderment. He tried one last time to get the explanation he felt he was owed. I still don't understand why you did it that way, Yvette, he said, stirring his coffee endlessly. It was so aggressive. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a vast, peaceful distance. He was a landscape I had left behind. You planned for a year to leave me without a conversation, I stated, a single, unchallengeable fact. I planned for 6 months to leave you with one you didn't have to have. Which one of us was being aggressive? He had no answer. He just shook his head, a man still trying to understand how he had lost control of the story. We signed the papers in silence. He walked out of the coffee shop and I watched him go, a figure receding into a life that no longer had anything to do with mine. There is a concept in my work called managed succession. It's how a forest or a landscape naturally evolves over time. Sometimes, for a new ecosystem to thrive, the old one must be cleared. It can look brutal, a controlled burn, a clear cutting. But it's not about destruction. It's about creating the conditions for new light to reach the forest floor. For years, I thought my marriage was a permanent garden, something to be tended and preserved at all costs. I thought my role was to be the patient, steady gardener, endlessly pulling weeds, amending the soil, propping up plants that were not suited for the climate. I thought endurance was the same thing as love. It is not. Endurance is what you do when you are waiting for conditions to change. Love is when the conditions are right. He called me reasonable, and I mistook it for a compliment. But reasonable was just a cage. It meant predictable. It meant manageable. It meant won't make a scene when I decide I'm done. When I finally stopped being reasonable, I started being free. The mistake was not in leaving. The mistake was in staying so long in a landscape that was never designed for my growth. The mistake was letting someone else hold the blueprints to my life. Now, I draw my own. My garden is thriving. And from my back patio, I can see the whole world. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.